Hi, welcome. Really nice to be talking to you today. My name is Sean McGuire, and I work for an organization called the Clean Air Fund. The Clean Air Fund is a grantee of the IKEA Foundation, which means that the IKEA Foundation gives us money. We're very grateful to receive that money from the IKEA Foundation. And we wanted to talk to you today a little bit about the work we do with some of that money. We are an organization, as you can tell from the name, that works principally on air pollution. Now, air pollution affects pretty much all of us. Right now, I'm talking to you from my home in North London, which is where I live. And I imagine you're sitting watching this in any number of cities across Europe, Asia, North America, South America. And one of the most profound effects of living in a city is that we tend to be affected by air pollution. Air pollution is a distinct and incredibly prevalent phenomenon of living in cities. So, what I'm going to do is run through a little bit of a presentation just around, what air pollution is. And I'll explain a bit of the basics about air pollution. And over the course of the presentation, you'll get a sense of what it is that the Clean Air Fund does, and why we are so grateful to have the support of the IKEA Foundation to help us do that work. So the presentation is basically, we'll tell you a little bit about what is air pollution, what the main air pollutants are. We'll talk a little bit about where air pollution comes from. We'll talk a bit about the effects that air pollution has on health, the economy, the environment. And of course, air pollution is very much linked to climate change. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And we'll talk also about who is most affected by air pollution, because it affects some of us worse than others. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk a bit about what we can do about it. What are the solutions? What are the ways in which we can address this? And it doesn't have to be something that only governments or city authorities can do. There are some things that we as individuals are able to do as well. And we'll give you some sense of what that is over the course of the next half an hour. So there will be a couple of little films as well. So I hope that you'll enjoy the presentation. And that we'll also give you an opportunity to ask us some questions. I'll tell you where you can do that in a second. And at the end, we'll see if we can answer some of those questions for you. And if not, we'll point you to where some of the answers will be coming. So I hope you enjoy this, and do let us know afterwards how it's gone. Okay. So I think you can see on the screen there that where to put the questions on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and some of you are also, I believe, watching this on YouTube. So please put questions or comments in while you're watching, and we'll try and answer those questions when we get them afterwards. All right. So the first thing to do is really to give you a sense of what is air pollution. Where does it come from? So we've got this really interesting short film from National Geographic, which just gives us a really good technical sense of where air pollution comes from. We all assume it comes from the tailpipes of cars and from the chimneys of power stations and factories. But National Geographic has given us a nice, clean overview in 3.5 minutes of what is air pollution and how it works. So let's listen to that, and then I'll come back afterwards.
Air pollution consists of chemicals or particles in the atmosphere that pose serious health and environmental threats. But what causes air pollution, and what does it mean for our planet? Some air pollution comes from natural sources like volcanic eruptions, wildfires, or allergens. But human activities such as energy use and agriculture. There are different types of human-made air pollution. When we burn fossil fuels to produce energy, they release greenhouse gases into the air. These emissions, such as carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and fluorinated gases, trap heat from the sun in Earth's atmosphere, leading to a rise in global temperatures. This creates a cycle where air pollution contributes to climate change, and climate change creates higher temperatures. In turn, higher temperatures intensify some types of air pollution. For example, climate change increases smog because it forms in the presence of high heat and increased levels of ultraviolet radiation. More frequent extreme weather, such as flooding, contributes to damp conditions, and therefore to a rise in mold. Warmer weather also leads to longer pollen seasons, and therefore more pollen production. Smog is a type of air pollution that reduces visibility and has serious health effects. Smog can be divided into two categories: sulfurous and photochemical. Sulfurous smog is made up of chemical compounds called sulfur oxides. It occurs when burning sulfur-bearing fossil fuels such as coal. Photochemical smog, also called ground-level ozone, is a result of the reaction between sunlight, nitrogen oxides, and volatile organic compounds. Nitrogen oxides come from car exhaust, coal power plants, and factory emissions. Volatile organic compounds are released from gasoline, paints, and many cleaning solvents. Smog not only creates a brown haze that reduces visibility, but also harms plants, irritates the eyes, and causes respiratory distress. Another category of air pollution is toxic pollutants. These are chemicals such as mercury, lead, dioxins, and benzene that are released during gas or coal combustion, waste incineration, or burning of gasoline. In addition to adverse environmental effects, toxic air pollution can cause serious health problems such as cancer, reproductive complications, and birth defects. While air pollution has many consequences for our planet, there are solutions. We can limit toxic pollutants, smog, and greenhouse gases by decreasing the use of fossil fuels, such as in transportation, manufacturing, and electricity generation. Reducing air pollution not only contributes to a cleaner environment and better human health, but can also slow the rate of global warming.
Okay, so there we are. I hope you found that interesting. That's the let me just see if I can get it onto the next slide. There we go. That's it. I hope you found that interesting. That was the kind of the broad overview of air pollution, where it comes from and how it affects us. I think the most important thing to say here is that air pollution is a problem that affects nearly everybody. There isn't really a level of air pollution in cities that is healthy, and over 90% of the world's population breathe unhealthy air. So it really is a problem that affects pretty much all of us. Sure, you might live in a very rural area and it won't affect you very much, but since most of the world's population lives in cities and will increasingly do so, air pollution is a problem that we really need to tackle if we want to protect human health and the health of our children in generations to come. It's particularly a problem in poorer countries. Air pollution is often a byproduct of economic growth, development. People buy cars, they buy generators to generate electricity in places where electricity supply isn't regular. They want to get around faster, they move goods, commerce increases, and all of this produces pollution. The ways in which we heat our homes, the ways in which we generate our electricity. They're all currently at the moment tend to increase the amount of pollution in the atmosphere. And as that film showed, it's both a problem for the planet in terms of increasing greenhouse gases, which leads to a warmer planet with all the nasty side effects that we know that is causing in terms of the changing climate we're all living, and more storms and frequent extreme weather events. But it also affects human health as well, particularly badly. So we need to begin a concerted effort to try to figure out how we clean up the air for all of us. So how does air pollution affect me as an individual? What's it doing to me when I breathe in air that's polluted? Well, one of the ways in which air pollution experts talk about pollution is they track things that are called particulates. And particulates are the little tiny microscopic fragments of dust that pollution puts in the air. The experts track different types of these particulates, and the particulates come from different sources. There are complicated chemical reactions that take place in the air, reactions between the sunlight and particular chemicals that come out of car exhausts, reactions from the sunlight with the ammonia that comes off the fertilizer that is spread over fields. There's small particulates that come from the fires that we burn in our houses because we think it's nice to have a fire at home and it keeps us warm and it looks nice. But all of these particulates go up into the air, and they mix and they mingle, and they have to go somewhere, these particulates. Sometimes when it rains, the particulates come out of the air and fall on the ground and get swept away. The wind can blow the particulates out of the cities. Trees can help block and soak up particulates. But unfortunately, a very large number of particulates enter our blood because we breathe them in. We breathe them in through our nose and our mouth. And that means that these particulates essentially end up in our lungs. And because they're very, very small, they can pass through the membranes in our lungs and go into our blood. And then once they're in our blood, they can travel to our brains, and they can travel to our heart, and they can travel to pretty much every cell and organ that we've got in our bodies. So you can see from the slide a little bit what the impacts of that mechanism are. People who have asthma, their asthma gets worse. People who have breathing problems, their breathing gets harder. And then the longer term effects is that there's a higher rate of lung cancer. There are a larger number of strokes. People have respiratory diseases and conditions, and there are other cardiovascular problems that come with air pollution. And the WHO, the World Health Organization, tracks particulate matter, and they set standards for the levels of particulate matter that there should be in the air. And there are very few cities that actually meet those WHO standards. So every one of us is living in the city. We're pretty much living with air that the World Health Organization says is unhealthy and bad for us. But who is actually most affected by this? Well, it probably won't surprise you that people who are a bit more vulnerable because they're older, or because they're poorer, or because they're younger, they are more affected by air pollution. So the elderly, who would have weaker hearts and be a bit more prone to strokes, they are disproportionately affected by air pollution. The poor, because they're less likely to be able to protect themselves, because they might not live in a nice house with a garden away from a main street. They're more likely to live closer to heavy traffic, or in a poorer neighborhood that's closer to an industrial facility or to a power plant. The poor are much more vulnerable to air pollution, and their health is much more affected by this phenomenon. And then finally, children and babies are more affected by air pollution. And we'll do a little bit of an exercise in a second that shows just why it is that children and babies are more affected by air pollution. But you have to think that, when you're young, you're still developing, you're still growing, your brain is developing, your lungs are developing. And if you breathe in all this harmful stuff, it's going to affect how you develop. It's going to affect how strong your brain is. It's going to affect your ability to concentrate, your ability to focus. So in many cities in the world, we're essentially poisoning our children because we are persisting in living with a pollution-heavy way of life. So why are children more at risk? Well, let's think about it. As an adult, I breathe more slowly. So what we want you to do is think about how a 6-year-old child breathes, and think about how the amount they are taking in of air every minute, how much of that is, how big that amount is in proportion to their body size. So if my normal breathing rate is, say, 8 to 16 minutes, then I'm breathing half the amount of time that a child is. So just to drive this home, what we want you to do is sit wherever you are, in your canteen or at your desk, and breathe like a child. So I'm going to put this metronome on now, and just for a minute or 30 seconds, I'm just going to ask you to breathe like a child. So every time the metronome clicks, I want you to take a breath. So let's go. Okay, so that's what it's like for a child to breathe, much more quickly than an adult. So although a child is smaller, they're breathing at double the rate. So they're taking in double the amount of air per body size than an adult. And what that means is they're essentially exposed to double the amount of pollution in a city than an adult is. And another phenomenon is that polluted air tends to cluster closer to the ground. And what else is closer to the ground? Children. Children's mouths and noses are closer to the ground because they're smaller. So just by dint of being smaller, they tend to breathe in more polluted air than adults. And obviously that has a disproportionate health effect on them. And just one story that's illustrative of this. Some of you may know this story already. And this is the story of a young girl in London who died 8 years ago. She was diagnosed with severe asthma, and she had numerous asthma attacks that kept being brought back to hospital, and the doctors weren't able to figure out a way of curing the asthma, and she eventually died from a very severe asthma attack. And just last year, the coroner ruled that her death had been partially caused by very, very high levels of air pollution from traffic on the road that she lived by, and said that there were illegal levels of air pollution and that the government needed to do something about this. And her mother, Rosamund, had said, well, listen, if I had known just how dirty the air was and just how harmful it was to my child, then of course I would have moved away from the house that I had, which was right on this busy road. And her mother, Rosamund, is now campaigning so that no other child ever dies from air pollution. So I think this is an instance of where somebody has cottoned on to the scale of the problem and the human harm that it does, and is taking action. And it's really an inspiration for the rest of us. And we at the Clean Air Fund are very inspired by the work that Rosamund is doing, campaigning to try to lower pollution levels in the city where she lives. So what can you do? What can we all do to help to clean the air that we breathe? Let's have a look at some of the potential solutions. Well, it may seem obvious, but it isn't always the case. We should be walking, cycling, and using public transport wherever possible. And you may say, well, but if I go in my car, aren't I exposed to less air pollution? No, actually, in your car, you're breathing the exhaust of other people. So by leaving the car at home, or not buying a car, and by taking the bus instead, or by taking your bicycle instead, or by walking, you are doing something that's healthier for you. You're doing something that's healthier for the community as well. So try to walk, try to cycle, try to use public transport where possible. Burn less. Seems very simple. Lots of us, as I was saying earlier on, we like a nice cozy fire in the corner of the house, or we might have an oven or a wood-fired oven. But and while it might look great and it might smell nice, actually, it's pumping particulates up into the air outside and probably into our rooms and homes as well. So try to burn less. I've decided that I'm only going to have a fire in my house on one day in the year now, and that's Christmas Day. So where previously I used to maybe have a fire 10 times a year, now that I've realized how damaging it is, I've decided to cut it down to just once a year. If you have a car, try to get an electric car if you can, if they're available. And if possible, switch your electricity provider to somebody who's sourcing electricity from renewable sources. Most countries now, you've got the option to buy your energy from a renewable energy provider. So that is really worth doing. Speak to others and share what you know. Talk to others about this presentation. If you've been intrigued by it, if you've been interested by it, start to do a little bit more research. Google what the air pollution is in your neighborhood. See how bad it is. Figure out whether anyone's campaigning on this, and see whether you can join in. Maybe there are some petitions you can sign, or some actions that you could take in your local community to work on reducing air pollution. In some cities, there are now traffic-free streets. Maybe you can campaign in your neighborhood for a traffic-free street. If you take your child to school, are you walking with that child to school? Or are you driving to school? Is there a way in which you could make fewer car journeys and maybe share a car journey with a few other kids, so you reduce the overall pollution that there is around you? Here's a good example of community action to reduce air pollution. We're all worried about our children, we all worry about their health, but this is a practical campaigning measure that parents have taken across Europe and North America, asking that the streets in front of their schools be closed to traffic so it's safer and cleaner for children to get to and from school. And this was an example of local campaigning, putting pressure on local politicians, and the power of individuals raising their voice. And that's something that we really encourage to happen. You can check online for the resources on air pollution. Nowadays, when you look on the weather app on your smartphone to see what the weather is going to be like, it often tells you what the air quality is like as well. So pay attention to that. How bad is the air pollution where I live? Should I be going out today? Is now a safe time to take exercise, or should I wait till later in the day, or should I go earlier in the day? Figure out where you can get information that makes you an informed citizen, informed about the air that you breathe, and get involved with community groups and local governments. Feedback, make your opinions known, and raise your voice. And of course, please follow the Clean Air Fund and visit our website so you can see what it is that we are doing. Now, we wanted to ask to see whether there was any questions. I don't know whether some of you will have asked some questions via Twitter or on the YouTube channel or via LinkedIn. Now is the opportunity in the few minutes left that to see whether there's any questions on the work that we've done. If not, then what we'll do is just encourage you to reach out to us directly at the Clean Air Fund via Twitter or via LinkedIn or on YouTube on this video. And with that, I just want to thank you for your attention. I hope you found this interesting. I hope this inspires you to figure out the amounts of air pollution in your neighborhood, how it might be affecting your health, and please get involved, take action, and raise your voice around the issues of air pollution and clean air where you live. Thanks very much for your attention, and I wish you all a great day wherever you are. Thank you, and bye-bye.